Hi, my name's Steve Waldron. I'm the GIS coordinator and trainer here in the city of Richmond. This course is called 3D GIS. This class focuses on visualizing data in 3D and making 3D data out of two-dimensional data for use in ArcGIS Online web scenes. The course design is such that I will be presenting and reviewing information contained in the slides. I'm going to be doing some demonstrations. And the topics will be reviewed in their entirety while students are going to do the exercises on their own after the class is over. So in other words, there will be exercises that you will be referred to in order to perform these tasks yourself. One of the things we are not going to be covering is how to create 3D buildings because that is a complicated subject matter and it's a little advanced for an introductory course. So why 3D? Well, we live in a 3D world, so people like to visualize GIS information three-dimensionally. Or sometimes two-dimensional mapping really isn't as effective in seeing spatial patterns in your data, whereas three-dimensional viewing of your data will reveal spatial patterns. And there are just certain types of analysis that require 3D. So here on this slide, we can see on the left is a traditional ArcGIS Pro map, and on the right is what we call a scene. Scenes are what we use in Pro for 3D GIS. We can see the little icons. We have little three-dimensional buildings appearing here for a scene. And in Pro for a map, which you're familiar with, we'll have this icon. So I'm going to go and jump into Pro real quick and just show you here we have a three-dimensional scene. Here's that icon I pointed out. And over here, I can toggle over. Here's a traditional map that we see in Pro. Next, I want to talk about how to navigate inside of a scene. Your, your mouse wheel is the key to navigating in a scene. You're actually going to press in on the wheel on your mouse, and if you move it up and down, it will tilt your scene. And if you press that button in and you move your mouse left and right, it will rotate the scene. If you do not press it in, you can just scroll in and out and it will zoom you in and out just like it does on a traditional map, which you're familiar with. Let's get a quick demo of that. I'm going to switch back to my scene and I'm going to use my mouse and I'm going to press down on the scroll wheel and I'm going to move my mouse left and I'm going to move it right. So you can see it rotates your scene. I'm going to zoom in a little bit without pressing in on the mouse wheel to show you the zooming. And now I'm going to press the mouse wheel in and I'll move my mouse up and back to adjust the tilt. Okay, so I can use the mouse wheel in combination to do tilting and rotating. So this is how you can view different angles within your scene. There are some special shortcut keys you can use, such as if you want to make sure that north is aligned to the top of your screen, you can just hit the N key on your keyboard. Or if you want to view a direct vertical down view, you can hit the letter P on your keyboard. So let's just give that a shot. I'm going to click the N key to get north to the top. It rotated just a little bit to get back there. And now I'll hit the P key. I'll scroll out just a little bit, and this is a vertical view. I can always use my mouse wheel and get my tilt back for any view or perspective that I want to use. Okay, well, how do you create a scene? Well, as the slide indicates, you'll need to make sure you make your insert um, ribbon active. And then over here, just as you've probably done in the past, you can add multiple maps to a pro project. But instead of clicking new map, there's a little down arrow and you'll see an option for new scene. So you will choose new local scene and it will add that into your pro project. And you'll see there are two options here in the scene. You have 3D layers and you have a section for 3D layers. So I'm going to go back into Pro and we're going to create a scene. Again, I need to get off of the map ribbon and get to the insert ribbon. And now I see that little down arrow and I'm going to choose add a new local scene. And having added that scene, I'm going to give it a name other than the simple word scene here. So I'm just going to right click on it and I'll go to the properties to give it a name. So I want to call this one City Center Scene. Okay, so now I have another new scene. I've got my 3D layers section and my 2D layers section. I currently don't have any information, but I can still use the scene and my mouse to rotate, tilt, whatever. So now it's just a matter of getting data added into the scene. So we're going to talk about using the city's 3D buildings that we've created. So in a 2D map containing our urban buildings multi-patch, which is just the name we've given it, we can select buildings for a particular study area. And then we can right click on that layer and we can save out our selected buildings to have our very own, I guess, study area of 3D buildings, which you can also then edit. You will not be able to edit the 3D buildings, the citywide layer we make available. But if you make copies of sections of that data for yourself within your own pro project, you can edit it and do all kinds of things to it, which we will show you today. So I'm going to go back to the map. I'll get out of the scene, go back to the map. Here we can see we've got our traditional two-dimensional building planimetrics. And we'll start with the 2D map. And we see I have already have the 2D buildings. And if I turn those off and I turn on that urban building multi-patch layer, looks a little different. You can see all these different shapes and triangles. That's because this is 3D data. We're just viewing it in a 2D map. So that's why they look different. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a bunch of these multi-patches or these features, and I'm going to export them into my own multi-patch layer in my pro project. So I want to use the city center area. So I'm going to go back to my map ribbon and use the select tool. I want to use this lasso and I'm going to trace the city center area. So I'm going to start the corner of Lee and North 3rd. I'm going to trace down all the way to Broad. I'm going to follow Broad all the way down. And I think I'll go one block past City Hall and make my way back up 11th Street to Lee and back. And I want to select all these buildings. So having done that, I can export them. So I'm going to right click on that layer. I'm going to go to Data. And I'm going to export. So by default, it's going to save this into my Pro Projects file geodatabase. So this is your own copy. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to name this um, City Center Buildings. Okay, we can see over here in my table of contents, City Center Buildings has been added back into my map following the export. So I'm going to clear my selection. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to turn off the citywide building multi-patch. And here we can see I have just the city center buildings. So we'll be good to go to continue on our demos and topics. So let's go back to the slideshow. And now we're ready to add our study area of 3D buildings back into the scene that we created. And after we do that, um, we can make any kind of edits we want on our personal copy of these buildings. So we can add our own attribute fields, we can edit attribute values, we can do definition queries, we can do lots of different things. So we're working under the assumption that you have basic pro skills, right? You have to be able to select features, you're comfortable with editing layers and things in your own file geodatabases, you're familiar with attributes and things of that nature. So I'm going to go back to Pro and demonstrate how to use this layer. So let's pretend Steve's a planner and I want to create a realistic view of the city center area and I want to show particular buildings that the city has a mind of to demolish. So I'm going to go to the city center scene and I'm going to come over to my catalog and I'm going to look inside my Pro Projects geodatabase and we can see there's the city center buildings. So I'm just going to drag this guy over into the scene. It'll zoom to the extent you can see the little blue wheel is circulating down here in the bottom right corner. So it's just trying to draw things. So here we are. This is our scene, our city center. So I'm going to flag a couple of these buildings with an attribute to be demolished. The first thing I would say is whenever you make a copy of the 3D buildings that you're interested in, let's take a quick look at the attribute table. We've already included an attribute field for you that you can use. It's all the way over here towards the end, called Users Custom Field. So this is just something we added. You can use it for whatever purpose you want. It is a text field. You could always add additional fields if you want to, but I'm going to use this field in order to flag certain buildings as being up for demolition. I'd like to get a vertical view, so I'll just hit the P button. So it went to a vertical view. I just need to pan back over. So here's my vertical view of the city center. Okay, I'm going to select some of these buildings. I'm going to continue to use this select tool with the lasso. And I'm going to drag a box around the Coliseum and I'll grab this parking garage and the public safety building. So I've selected those three. And now I will go to the edit ribbon and I like to use the attributes tool here for editing. So it'll pop over here on the right. Here's all the different records that make up the parts of these buildings. But if I can click on the topmost record here, this will edit everything below. And so I'm just going to flag these for demo, and I'll click apply. Okay, I think I'll clear my selection. And now I'm going to on the edit ribbon, I'm going to save my work. So again, we assume you are comfortable with the Pro, you've been using it a while, and you know how to edit. So let's thematically map this data using that attribute field. So as you know, we have to go to the appearance ribbon, and we will thematically map it using unique values. And we want to use the field, the user's custom field. Here's a good point to make. Let's say I want to adjust my tilt, my rotation and things. Well, as long as I'm on the appearance ribbon, I really can't do that. I need to get back to the map ribbon and click on the Explore tool. And now I have control over my navigation again. So let's just tilt the scene a little bit so we can see it three-dimensionally. Let's say I want these to appear in red, and these are fine showing in green. So we can always come in. I just clicked on the symbol here, and it recognizes we're working with three-dimensional data. So I want to use red with edges. Now we can see they are red with edges. Actually, I can go back and adjust the green. Maybe I want the green to be white with edges. So there we go. This is our scene. We can see in red are the buildings that are slated for demolition. Before we leave the topic of working with existing 3D buildings, I'll mention that the planning department will use information like this for presenting development scenarios. So including third-party BIM models that they may get from developers. So one of the things we can do, let me go back to my slideshow. Is we can combine 2 dimensions with 3 dimensions in our scenes. Because you know how the scene we've seen where it's got 3D layers section, it also has a 2D layers section. So maybe if I keep my planning hat on, I want to see the zoning layer underneath my city center information. So you can go ahead and add 2D layers to your scene, and it will be draped over the ground elevation. So let's go back, see how that works. It's the same as if we were working in a map. There's no difference. So I'm going to use the Add Data button. I'm going to go to our organization to find our GIS layers. I'm going to filter it on the category for zoning. Just makes it easier to find things. And here are the zoning districts. You can see the little blue wheel is spinning down here. Okay, the zoning layers have been displayed underneath and they appear in our table of contents here under 2D layers. They're just being draped over the ground surface. So you can add any 2D layers that you like. We go back to the slideshow. Okay, it is a known limitation that if you want to do labeling, that labeling under 2D layers doesn't work. You actually have to put a copy of the layer up under the 3D layers heading, and then the labels will work. So you may ask, why include the layer under both 2D layers and 3D layers? Well, the answer is because 2D layers draping displays the features much clearer. So this is just the workaround that I found that works well. So let's say we want to label things on the map. I'm going to right click on the zoning layer here, and I'm going to paste a copy of it to the scene. Of course, it recognizes it's 2D, but I can click and drag it. Whoops. I'm going to move it up here under 3D layers. And having done that, now I can actually label the zoning layers. So to do labeling, I'll come up to the ribbon for that. And so that it's nice and clear and you can see it, I'm going to make the labels red and I'm going to use bold. I'll click label. The blue wheel in the corner spinning. It's trying to display. And we can see those have come into view. We may even right click here and change the name of the layer to be called labels. That way, I'll go ahead and save my pro project as well. This way, if you when we publish a scene, we can see that the layer will be called labels and we can turn those on and off and still see the zoning district boundaries. So that's how that works. I'm gonna go back to the slideshow. And I think we're ready to show you guys how to do publishing. This slide just showed you what I demonstrated. So you'll always have the slide you can refer to. Yeah. All right. Publishing a scene. So um, you want to make sure you configure everything in ArcGIS Pro before you publish. So you want to consider all the following things to prepare for publishing. Um, the first thing that I always want you to think about is maps and scenes, both in Pro. They use a coordinate system. By default, we're always using the state plane coordinate system here in Richmond because that's what we keep our data in. But ArcGIS Online uses the Web Mercator projection. It's the same projection used by Google Maps and Bing, as a matter of fact. So these web GIS environments want to use Web Mercator. So we need to make sure we fix the projection on our scene before we publish because we want the data to be able to display correctly in our ArcGIS Online web scene. So this slide shows you how to do that. And so let's go ahead and do that ourselves by going into our scene. I'm going to right click on it. I'm going to go back to the properties. And in the properties, there's the section called coordinate systems. So to find the proper coordinate system, and there are, maybe 100 different kinds of coordinate systems, but we want to do a search on WGS 1984. And here it is. It's the WGS 1984 Web Mercator Auxiliary Sphere. So that's a mouthful. But anyway, this is the one you're looking for. And now the map will have to redraw itself, or this will have to redraw itself. But it's that simple to adjust the coordinate system the way it needs to be before publishing to ArcGIS Online. I think I'll go ahead and save my project while I'm at it. All right, I'm going to go back, review the slide that talks about publishing. Oh, also, before you publish, you may want to configure the pop-ups. So as a refresher, pop-ups are when users are working in your 3D scene, they might click on things, doing identifies, and the system will show you a pop-up and display what it is you're clicking on, right? So in the parcel mapper, you click on a parcel it tells you parcel info. In a scene, you can click on features. It'll tell you what you're clicking on. So you want to set your pop-ups before you publish. Um, you should even disable pop-ups if you don't want things to be identifiable. They're just in the map for a picture. So, I'm thinking if I'm displaying the zoning labels, why would I need to have a pop-up for the zoning layers? So I might disable those pop-ups. So let's go back to the city scene, city center scene. And let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to right click on the zoning labels and I'm going to disable pop-ups. I'm going to right click on zoning districts. I'm going to do the same thing. To continue on in the storyline here, that I'm a planner and I'm creating a custom scene and I want to add my own attribute field, I can do that too, because I want to add an attribute field for which I can assign attributes that will appear in a pop-up. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add a new attribute field. So I'm going to click on my multi-patch layer here from my Pro project, and I'm going to go to the fields. So here's a listing of all the fields for that layer. A lot of this you don't care about. But here at the bottom, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to add a new field, and I'm going to call it building name. And this is just to give you guys an example of how you can customize the behavior for this. And I'm going to make it, it's a text field. I'll make it 40 spaces wide. Okay, there's my field. I need to click save. And now I'm going to go back to the city scene. And I think I'll just update the attributes for some of these. Let me get a better view for selecting the features. I think I like to get a top-down view. Okay. I'm going to go back to the edit ribbon because the edit ribbon has a select tool, just like the map ribbon does. And I want to use the lasso option. So here's City Hall. Let's go ahead and label City Hall. I'm going to go to the attributes. And for that particular feature, for the building name, we'll call it City Hall. I'll click apply. This is next door. This is the Children's Hospital next door to us. So I'm going to assign that as the building name. And I will apply that. And let's just label one more. Here's the Virginia Library, which is on the other side of City Hall. Okay, so let's go down. This is the Library of Virginia. I'll click apply. Okay, so I did some editing there. Let me hit clear. And on the edit ribbon, I'm going to save my work. Yes, save all the edits. All right. Now, let me go back to the next slide. So again, disable pop-ups if you don't want any, or configure pop-ups if you do want to have custom pop-ups. So what we see here on this slide is what I just demonstrated. You can add additional fields if you like, and this is just showing you a reminder of how to add fields and then making sure you save the additional field that you add. And now we're ready to configure a pop-up for our buildings. So the way we do this is we just right click on it, and instead of disable pop-ups, we can underneath it choose configure pop-ups. And by default, it's going to want to label or pop up all the attributes that we have. So there's a lot of gobbledygook in here. This is stuff that's just part of the structure of the original 2D building footprints before we started and converting them into 3D buildings, which we've already done previously. But I want my pop-up only to display the building name. I don't want any of this other stuff to show up. So this slide's showing you how to do that. So when you go to configure pop-ups, this is what the pane will look like. And there's a little pencil next to the fields you can click on, and you can remove these check marks and only have a check mark for what you want to see in your results. So we're going to go and we're going to configure this. So I'm going to hop back out, and I'm going to go to my city center buildings, and I'm going to configure these pop-ups. So over here on the right, where the fields portion is, actually, before I do that, I think I'll change the title. I'm just going to put something in here called my pop-up. Not very creative, but it works for me. And for fields, okay, here's that pencil that was mentioned in the slide. So I'm going to remove this check mark, and I'm going to remove the check mark here so that none of these get displayed, except for I'm going to reapply the one check mark for the one field that I do want users to see when they click on features. Okay, so that is set. I'm going to save my project. I'm going to click on one of these buildings to test my pop-up. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me get off of the select tool. So I need to get back to my map ribbon and click on explore. So now when I single click on things, it's like doing identify. So here we can see we've got the pop-up, and it says building name, Library of Virginia. If I click on this feature, building name, City Hall. Okay, so it's much simpler than listing out all those attributes that no one's going to care about. Okay, I think we're in pretty good shape. I'm going to save my project one more time. And now finally, we're going to go and see how to publish. So in the slide deck on slide 14, you will see the way to publish is under the share ribbon. And you guys have probably shared maps in the past or shared specific layers, but you can share a web scene. And it has all the standard things you are accustomed to filling out, right? So you would give it a name, a summary, tags, put it in a folder in your workspace to keep things organized. You're going to share it appropriately. Probably it's something you want shared with everyone. If it's going to be viewed by the public, you would need to do that. And in the status window, it'll initially start off blue as it's processing. And then when it's done, it'll turn green, meaning it's ready to go. And you can click on this manage the web scene, which will pop it open in your web browser for you. So let's go ahead and publish. I'm going to go up to the share ribbon. And here we can see that I can share a web scene. So I'm going to call this City Center, and I'm going to use my initials. And normally we would all use really good metadata, but for this purposes, I'm just putting in some words here to speed things up. And for my folder, I do have a location I want this to go in, so I can clean up after myself. Let's see here. Demo scene is where I'm going to put it. I'm going to go ahead and share it with everyone. I'm going to analyze. No errors or warnings found, so I'm going to click the share button. So the sharing will take a minute or two, so we'll be patient while that happens. Obviously, the larger your study area for which you've selected out the 3D buildings that you want to use, the longer it will take to publish. So this is actually a relatively small area, when you consider the city at large. So the publishing really isn't going to take that long. Okay, it's successfully published, and now it tells us that it's creating a web scene down here, and now it's preparing it. Okay, here's that blue background I was telling you about. So the web scene is a th- is a is it's in ArcGIS Online, just like you can have a web map, you can have a web scene, and it uses what's called caching. So the 3D data requires caching. And caching can take a little while to process, but it's what enables us to be able to pan and navigate, tilt, rotate within the web browser. It all has to be pre-cached because you don't want to have your web browser to have to figure out, oh, what's the scene look like now? What does it look like now? They cache it all in advance of all possible views and angles of the data in order to make it process or respond quickly to the user who's trying to interact in the scene. Okay, look, it just turned green, which means it's done caching. I'm going to click on this link here to manage the web scene. And so it took me to my scene, which I called City Center Scene with my initials. And I'm going to go ahead and open it. So this is what your scene is going to look like in ArcGIS Online. It's not going to look exactly like it does in the ArcGIS Pro, but it looks very similar. So here we can see that I can navigate, I can zoom in and out, and it's pretty responsive. I'm going to click on some features. Here's my pop-up, building name, Library of Virginia. There's my title that I gave it, right? Here's the Children's Hospital. Okay, Children's Hospital. So the scene is working. This is what users will see that are accessing your scene. And you even have over here on the top right, people can turn labels on and off. So here you can see the zoning labels. We can turn those off if we don't want to see those. You can turn any of these off and back on. You got your legend, so people can, see that red means those are to be demoed. And here's a neat little tool for you. If you want to do shadow analysis, you can view daylight. So you could pick any day of any year and time. So this is, I don't know why, but it defaults to March 15. And this is 12 p.m. So I can go earlier in the day. See how the shadows are creeping? Or I can go later in the day. So if you want to do shadow analysis, that tool exists there. Okay, before we move on, um, let's go ahead and tell you how you can get a hold of these 3D buildings, the citywide 3D buildings yourself. So we've got that documented for you in slide number 15. So I'm not going to do this, but it's documented for you. The way it's done is you'll log into ArcGIS Online and you're actually going to do a search in the top search bar and do a search for this COR underscore 3D underscore buildings project. And it will find it. It will find this, it's a packaged project that we've created. And then there's a download button, so you can download it. And it will copy down this Pro package. And if you double click on it, it opens in ArcGIS Pro. And when it does, it'll look just like my Pro project that has the citywide building footprints everywhere. So you can go in, you can selectively grab what you want to use if you don't want the citywide scene. So just like you saw demonstrated here. So that's how people can get access to the 3D buildings. And you'll actually do this in the exercises at the end of class on your own. So we spoon feed you all the steps of how to do it. So you will actually perform this step. So now that we've shown you how you might use the city's existing 3D buildings that we've created, let's move on and show you how you can map two-dimensional polygon layers in 3 dimension. This can be done if they have numerical attributes. So what we're going to do is we will use a Census Bureau data source to illustrate this. So the steps all begin here on 16. You'll have a scene and you're going to add a feature class to your scene. And when you do, it gets added under the 2D layer section, which means it just gets draped over the surface. But you'll need to move it. You'll click and drag and move it like you saw me do with the zoning when I was trying to set the labels. But you'll drag that up under 3D layers. And once you've done that, you'll go to the appearance ribbon. And there's this section here called type. And the type for the appearance is going to be base height. And then you'll tell it what attribute field are you trying to extrude by. So I'm going to demonstrate what these steps are showing you. So let me go back to ArcGIS Pro. And I'm going to create a new local scene. A little bit of a review here, right? So I'm going to go to the Insert ribbon. And I want to insert another local scene. And just for clarity, I want to give this a name other than scene. I'm going to call it census blocks scene. Okay, so I create a scene. And in my Pro project, so in our catalog in my Pro project, I can see that my file geodatabase, I've already got this data prepared and it's right here, census blocks. So I'm going to click and add my 2D data into my new scene. Notice it will put it under 2D layers and the display is going to just drape it over the elevation surface to start off with. And I want to move it. So I'm going to click and drag it up to 3D layers. And it should be done drawing in a minute here. Okay, so it's trying its best. So while it's still selected, as the slide shows, I want to go up to the appearance ribbon and I want to click on type. So a feature extrusion type. We want to extrude it from the base height, which just basically means I extrude from ground elevation going upward. And if we take a look at the attribute table real quick, I just want to show you what attributes we've got in here. So this is from the census. These names might not make the best sense, but we got TA persons. That's the total number of persons in a census block. And then we've got this information broken down by other races. So we'll just work with the total persons for demonstration purposes. And I've already chosen the type, so now I just have to tell it what's the field. I want to use the total persons. So it's looking at that attribute field. It'll pretend that the units are in meters. Okay, it doesn't really matter. We're just getting a visual perspective. We could change this to be miles or feet, US feet, what have you. I'll just leave it in meters. It'll be fine. And now if I were to zoom in just a little bit, and then I'm gonna apply a tilt, you guys can see they really are being extruded up vertically, and the higher the census block is extruded, it means the more people are found in that census block. So it's interesting. You can see we've got sections of the river. No one lives there. We've got sections that are just like, cemeteries and stuff like that. No one's living there. So what we can do is we can apply a definition query to even remove blocks that don't contain data. So I think I'll go ahead and do that. So I'm going to right click on the layer and go to the properties, and we can do a definition query. So I think the definition query I want to use is I want only to display where the total persons is greater than 0. Is greater than, and we'll just type 0 and I'll hit OK. So it's going to redraw. And this is how we can eliminate unneeded polygons. Right, so now we can see the river cutting through the city here and other places where there are no population in those census blocks. So downtown has a lot of office buildings or parking lots. No one lives in those things. So let me go back to the presentation. Okay, currently you saw in Pro Project that my extrusion features were all just showing in green. Well, you guys know how to do thematic mapping. We can apply a color ramp in combination with the extrusions that really helps with the visualization. So we could use a color ramp that goes from like yellow to red or whatever color ramp you like, and it will coincide with the extrusion that makes it more easy to interpret. So we can use your mapping skills to apply a color ramp by just going, as a reminder on this slide, we can go to the appearance ribbon and go to symbology and say symbolize them with graduated colors. So let's go ahead and try this out. I'm going to go back to Pro. I've still got it selected over here in my table of contents. I got my appearance ribbon, and I'm going to go to symbology and use graduated colors. The field, it looks like it picks up on total persons by default, which is the one I want to use, so that's just fine. And here we can see red means more people. The taller the feature also means more, the more people there are. So it's nice to use or include color ramps along with your extrusions of your 2D features. It's interesting. Obviously, some of these census blocks are bigger than other ones, right? So here in the fan area, for example, we have tiny little blocks. And then down here in the south side, some census blocks are pretty big. So here's a big one over here. And there's probably just large apartment complexes or something found here, and that's why it's so tall. Just something to think about. You can actually normalize your data. So like that just means divided by. So like if I want to divide the total persons by, let's just say, for example, the area, this would give us more of a color that means how dense the population might be. So here we can see um, there's more people here. We can still see that fact because they're extruded high, but the color scheme is telling us, persons divided by area, it's not as dense. Whereas you look over here, there's a couple of blocks here that are really dense. And I bet you all can guess that this is VCU, and these are some pretty large dormitories. So not only do they have a lot of population there, they also have a lot of density. And you can see where the dense populations are. So you guys have the skills with doing thematic mapping, and now you can combine that with the ability of doing 3D extractions, extrusions of polygon features that you may have. So we just use census data as an example. So I'll go ahead and change this back to none before we proceed. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to publish this web scene as a web scene. So remember, the first thing we have to do is make sure we set the coordinate system. Right now it's still showing that state plane coordinate system. And here because we've used this other projection in our pro project for another scene, I think what it's doing is it sees it and it's right here. We don't even have to do a search. So we can just click Web Mercator and apply it. And we're going to publish this. We'll be patient while it publishes, and we'll go check it out in ArcGIS Online. So there's another thing that will happen. I just want to forewarn everybody is if we go and we look at the properties of the census blocks, this 2D layer, if we go to properties up here under general, actually, where is it? Anyway, we'll see what happens. I'm sorry I went off task. Okay, so we have to go to share, and we want to share a web scene. I'm going to put my initials on here at the end. I'm just going to put some quick bad metadata in here, but that's okay. I'm just going to delete it when I'm all done. I'm going to put it in the same folder, which was demoing a scene. Now, when I click analyze, it does find an issue. So this is okay. If if you publish data, I'm sure you've seen this message before. It's something about allowing unique assignment of unique number IDs for sharing. So if you click on the little options or ellipse here and you change the general map properties, they just want you to put a check mark in here. So it doesn't exist right now, but if you put that check mark there, everything will be good. Notice it goes to a green check mark. So it's ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share it. It'll be the same experience we had before when we were trying to publish the city center. I might argue the city center had fewer features, right? It was just a few blocks of downtown. And this is a citywide um, polygon layer that's being extruded. So it might take just a little bit longer, but still um, it will publish here shortly. Oh, that actually went pretty quick. And notice that it's already green. So let's click on Manage the Web Scene and go take a look. So let's open it, and we didn't customize um, the pop-ups for this, but we could have. You guys have those skills, right? I can zoom in and out. I can rotate and tilt, look at it from different perspectives. I can click on a polygon, and here I can see all the census attributes. So I did not customize this pop-up, but that's okay. All right. So maybe you have a use case where you're going to have polygons that you want to extrude. All right, let's go back to our presentation. Go to the next slide. So like polygon layers, you can have point data with numerical attributes. So let's take a look at our pretend scenario, right? This is obviously phony, but it's okay. We're just trying to come up with fun data that we can use to make a point. So we'll say a study by the National Institute of Health of reported tripping hazards resulting in people skinning their knees associated with restaurants, bars and clubs, and convenience stores within the city of Richmond over the course of 2 years was conducted. So what's our assignment? We want to map the results of that study in the most effective way. So here we will try mapping in more traditional ways, and then we'll do it in 3D, and we can see if you agree if the 3D method is the best method. You'll recall very early on that I said that 3D mapping is sometimes better and easier to see patterns in your data. So in this first demo, we're just going to map them with the points with color ramp and leave them as points. So let's jump over here, and I'm going to insert a new map. So I'm going to go to the insert ribbon and add a map this time. Notice the icon here is two 3D looking buildings. That's because it still remembers we were adding a new local scene, but we want to add a map. So it'll add a new map, and I've already got some data ready to go in my Pro project, so I can get to it from the catalog. And it's right here. It's called Restaurant Bar Convenience Store. I'll click on one of these features so we can see the attributes. And the attributes are, there's a field here called count. We're going to say that's the number of times people have fallen and skinned their knee. So thematic mapping, this is not new to you. Let's go up to the appearance ribbon, and we're going to do a color ramp on these. So we'll do graduated color on the count field. Heck, we'll even increase it to 10 classes instead of 5. And we can see we have our different color dots depending on the number of skin knees that have occurred at those locations. Okay, so cool, we did it. That's one way that you can do thematic mapping. I'll go back to my slideshow. But there's another way we can try as we try to make our point. Let's try using proportional symbols. So in the second demonstration, it'll apply the bigger the circle, the more skin knees have occurred. The smaller the circle for the point, the fewer. So if we go back to our Pro project and we change the symbology to use proportional symbols on the count field, which it does it picks that one up by default, we can see here, okay, bigger the circles, smaller circles. I see what's going on here. So is this the best? Well, let's learn how to make point data with a 3D perspective and see if you think that is the best way. So slide 21 is an important one. And I just want to review some facts with you that point data with numerical attributes can be extruded in Pro, but the points won't publish properly to ArcGIS Online in a 3D scene as points. And I think the reason is because they don't really have geometry, or their geometry is just XY, which doesn't really occupy space. And so there's no real shape there to show in a 3D sense. So the workaround process that we're going to use, I'm teaching you to use, is just buffer your points to create polygon versions of your points. And once you have that, you can extrude them, you can publish them, you can see them in ArcGIS Online web scene, in a 3D web scene. So let's go to the next slide. This is just documenting the process. So let's review the slides, then I'll perform the demo. So I'm going to add the point feature class to our scene, which I've done, and it will get added under 2D layers. We'll have to move that. Oh no, I'm sorry. We have to buffer first. So we're going to convert those into polygons. I have found I like using a distance of 15 feet for the buffer. The output results, I think, look good for that. Once you've done that, we just repeat the same steps we used before for mapping the census blocks. You'll go to the appearance ribbon, you'll choose the type, you'll choose base height as the type, and I showed you it's the count field that we want to use. So you'll use the count field. And then optionally, we can also use color ramps, just like we did on the census blocks. But there's a little tip and trick to this when you're dealing with really small 15 diameter polygons, which I will show you. So let's go back to Pro and see how this can work. So while we're doing this, be thinking about how you might have point data with numerical information, and you might want to be able to extrude that. So I'm going to go back to city scene. I'm going to remove the citywide layer. We're done looking at that. And I'm going to add from the catalog the restaurant, bar, convenience store layer. Okay, it adds it down here under 2D layers. So that's fine. We want to do a buffer. So I think everybody knows how to do a buffer, but it's documented in the slides if you don't know. So to get to the buffer tool, I think I'll do it from the analysis and get to my geoprocessing tools, and I'll just do a search. Here's the buffer tool. And the input features are the restaurant, bars, and convenience stores. And my output, I think I'm going to want to call it, I'll call it knee buffer. People who skin their knees, that's the buffer. And what's the distance? I said 15 feet is the distance I like. And I'm going to run that guy. So this will happen pretty quickly. The output's going to automatically get added back into the scene. It's interesting that it puts it into the 3D layers by default, and that's fine because that's where we're going to want it to go. So I'm going to turn off the original. And now I'm going to repeat the steps for extruding 2D polygons. So we'll go up to appearance on that ribbon, and the type of extrusion is going to be from base height. And we said the field is called count. So it's going to try to display those polygons by extruding them based on the count field. I think I'll zoom in while that's happening. And here, it's still, you can see the blue wheel still spinning down here. Okay. I'm going to tilt. And look at that. We can see the tallest locations have the greatest number of skin knees that have occurred. Obviously, we can click on these features and the system will tell us. So this is the Crazy Thai Fusion Restaurant, right? So this is one way to view the data and see greater counts than other locations. So hey, let's combine color ramps with this, just like we did with the census blocks. So we'll go to symbology, and we're going to use graduated colors. I'll go ahead and just let it apply this color ramp. And what you'll see is that these I'll call them smokestacks for now. These smokestack shaped polygons, they don't all change color, but the very tops of the stacks do. So as I rotate so we can see this a little better, you can see the tops of these stacks are showing as red. Here's some over here that are yellow. Okay, here's some that are orange that correspond to our legend. Well, you can make it so the whole stack is showing the color and not just the tops of the smokestacks. So before we start, I want to use a different color ramp. I'd like to go from blue to red. So just and this is really just a review, there's a limited number of ramps that you're being just shown right off the bat. If you click on show all, you get a much longer list. So I'm just going to see if I can find one that goes from blue to green. Here's one that, or blue to red, sorry. Here's one that goes from blue to red. I'm going to click on that. And then I'm going to click on the little gear and notice I want apply to fill and outline as an option. So if I click this, it's going to apply not just to the tops, but now it applies to the whole stack. So here we can see I've got something that's much easier to see. And if I go back to the slideshow, that's what you're seeing here on slide 23 is the documentation for apply to fill and outline is something you'll probably want to do. So having seen all these ways of viewing the data, which one of these is most effective for identifying visually where we've got the biggest problems with people falling down and skinning their knee? So I would make the argument the 3D is the best. And it also looks like we've got a problem over here near VCU. So I guess those kids are not paying attention while they're walking. Okay, moving right along. Multi-patch. You can save your two-dimensional extractions that we've done while retaining any symbolization you've done as a special type of feature class. So a multi-patch feature class maintains the 3D height and any symbology as default. So after extracting and symbolizing, you use this particular geoprocessing tool called 3D layer to feature class, and you can save it out into your Pro Projects file geodatabase. And then you can even publish that as a layer up to ArcGIS Online, and anyone with access to it can add it to their own scenes if they want to. And for naming conventions, what I would suggest is just use a suffix of underscore MP for multi-patch. And that way, in addition to the icon, which looks like this, in catalog, you'll see that icon, but by the name of it, you'll even recognize, oh, this is a multi-patch. So let's see here, catch up. All right, so let's go and create a multi-patch. By the way, you'll remember the city's 3D buildings citywide was called urban underscore building multi-patch. So that word multi-patch, you've already seen that before. So I'm going to go back to my geoprocessing tools and I'm going to do a search for 3D layer to feature class. Okay, here's that tool. This is a really easy tool to use. You just plug in whatever's being 3D extruded. I've got knee buffer is the one. And my output feature class, I'm going to call it knee buffer underscore MP for multi-patch. And it'll save it in my Pro Project file geodatabase by default. So away it goes. Okay, it's already done. And it's also going to add that back into the Pro project as it does by default. So I can actually remove my 2D extraction layer that I did. And I can see here that the multi-patch layer has maintained everything. It's got the height, it's got the color I applied, everything about it. So that's nice that it remembers all that. So I'm not going to take the time to publish this. I've already published it prior. So let me go up here and see what this next slide shows. Okay, so this is just a reminder that if you're going to publish a specific layer, like the knee buffer multi-patch, you need to go and set the coordinate system on the scene so that when you right click on it and you share out just the specific layer, it will use that actual coordinate for its base elevation when it does the display in the web scene. If you forget to do this when you export, or I'm sorry, when you share um, a multi-patch layer to ArcGIS Online, you're going to get a message saying it cannot be added to a web scene because the coordinate system has a problem. But just remember to do this. And I'm not going to do this, but I've already done it previous. So if we just flip on over here to ArcGIS Online, here I can see I've got my knee buffer multi-patch layer. I'll go ahead and I'll just open it in the scene viewer. And I'm going to zoom in and I'll use my navigation tools. And we can see the multi-patch layer is a hosted scene layer is what they call it. Here we're viewing it from the north, looking down towards the river. So this is how you publish, exactly like the way you publish any layer up to ArcGIS Online. You do a share as web layer option. So that's the purpose of seeing this slide. When you publish a multi-patch, it's going to create two different items in your content. The one called the scene layer hosted, that's the important one. That is the 3D layer. If you see something called package, this got copied up and then it was unpacked within ArcGIS Online. And after it's done and it creates this, you don't even need this anymore. So if you see a scene layer package associated with it, you can remove it to save space and clean up your workspace. So let's look at the bottom half of this slide and recall that previously we just published the whole scene, like we did with the city center and we did with the census blocks, and everything contained within it. Well, in addition to publishing multi-patch layers as specific scene layers, like we saw um, with our skin knees multi-patch, you can create scenes inside of ArcGIS Online without using Pro. So just like you would click on Map to create a map in ArcGIS Online, you can create a scene by just clicking on Scene. And once you've done that, you can add scene layers into it. So as I mentioned before, for time and expediency, I already published the copy of the knee buffer multi-patch. But now let's see if we can go and add some other data into our scene. So the way you would do that when you open the scene is documented here. Um, you'll click on the layers and then you'll click add layers. The third step is you need to be able to search for and find the 3D layers that you want. So we're going to go and add the 3D buildings into my scene and we'll see them all combined together. So let's go back to ArcGIS Online in my scene. And here I want to add layers. I'm interested in my organization, so the whole organization. And I'm going to do a search for buildings multi-patch. And here is the one that actually, you know what? I'm going to teach you this way. We have a filter. So just like you would use to find parcels or addresses or neighborhoods, whatever, we have a category here called 3D. So we've got flood wall, we got trees, and we have building multi-patch. So let's go and add the building multi-patch. This is a way you guys can get that if you want it. And I can click done. I can get rid of this layers by clicking on the layers tool here. It will move it back over. So now look at this. We're looking from the north down the ridge, down to the river basin here, and we've got our 3D buildings, and we have the places where people are falling down. So, this could be a real useful method for displaying information that you want to convey to your end users using 3D. I'll go back to my slideshow and we will wrap things up. What this slide shows you, well, in this course, we focused on ways you can make 2D GIS data viewable in 3D in scenes. And viewing data in 3D, users might see information that's not readily apparent in 2D mapping. We saw examples using thematic mapping of points or changing the symbol sizes. So viewing data in 3D is also good for conceptualizing our city. We've seen how to create web scenes in 3D and how to publish data for use in web scenes. However, the 3D arena for GIS is actually pretty expansive. And I think we can honestly say that 3D GIS is a specialty in the field of GIS. Just like imagery or raster analysis is a specialty. I mean, even cartography is a specialty, or cadastral, to name a few. So if you were to go to ESRI's training catalog, and here's the URL for that, and you were to do a search for classes with the word 3D, you're going to see a lot of classes. There are no fewer than 10 courses that you're going to see returned. I recommend, if you want to learn even more, like how to do analysis, like doing view shed analysis or line of sight analysis with 3D, things of that nature. Um, Start with the 3D visualization and analytics fundamentals, which is a learning plan. So you'll see that when you log in and do that search. Just make sure you log in with your account, because being a City of Richmond employee, a lot of those classes will be unlocked for you, meaning you can take them for free. And then our final slide, you're going to refer back to the slide deck, and in order to perform the 3D course exercises that we've prepared for you, you're going to want to go to this path in your Windows Explorer, File Explorer, and there is a Word document. I want you to make a copy of that, and when you open it, it will contain all the instructions you need to download a pro package file from ArcGIS Online that we've created. You'll save it to your computer, and all the exercises and instructions are in that Word document. So you're going to perform all the demos that you saw here today. So having said that, I think that, and I hope that this class will be beneficial for people, and everything will be spoon-fed to you in those exercises in combination with the slideshow. You should be in good shape. So that will conclude the 3D class. Thank you.